show. So today we're going to be doing some cooking, which I know you guys are really excited about. I am too. And one of the recipes I'm going to be cooking today is butternut squash soup. It's one of my favorites for the fall, and I love it because I feel like a lot of people are really intimidated by the butternut squash soup, and why wouldn't they be? Because look at how big this thing is. And I'm using a recipe that comes from this cookbook. It's actually one of the first cookbooks I ever got, and how I started learning how to cook in the classroom. So love this book and love the recipe.
2 ounces of butter, 8 ounces of onions, small diced, 8 ounces of leeks, small dice, 12 ounces of carrots, small dice, 4 pounds butternut squash, medium dice. The butternut squash can be weighed prior to purchasing, 5 quarts of vegetable stock, 1.5 pound of tart firm apples. I went with Gala, 1 ounce butter, 2 ounces brown sugar. This is for caramelizing your apples. 1.5 teaspoon of salt to taste, half a teaspoon white pepper, half a teaspoon ground allspice, half a teaspoon ground ginger. In my recipe, I didn't use any salt, white pepper, ground allspice, or ground ginger.
So the first thing I always do before I cook is wash my hands. So I want to make sure I start good, and then if you look around, the first thing I also did was wipe down my service area. So the first thing you're going to do is start with your butternut squash. So the first thing I like to do is peel the skin because it's really tough, and it's going to be hard to peel it. So just be aware, you can either use your knife to start a slit like this, and then start peeling, and then you can start cutting. So it's up to you, because if not, you're gonna have to put a lot of pressure on here just to even get this to start. So that's the first thing I do, is I start with like that, or it might be easier just to use your knife. So whatever you wanna use. The other thing we're gonna be doing is taking the ends off. So however you wanna do it, but that's the way that I typically start. So I just washed my carrots, so I'm gonna start cutting those. If you're in a hurry like I am, you can buy onions already chopped. You can buy carrots already chopped too, but the ones that I saw were shredded and that wasn't what I want. I'm gonna do small cut. You can do a small dice. I'm gonna do coins, as you'll see. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean my leek. I'm going to wash it, and then I'm going to cut it. But if anyone has worked with leeks or hasn't worked with leek, make sure you peel it back, because then you can see the dirt that's in here. Now this is flimsy, so you don't have to use it, but I like to use the whole vegetable, so I'm going to clean it. But that's why we peel it, so that way we get the dirt out from inside. At the bottom, I'm left with this end. So if you wanted, you could chop this end off. If you're going to be making a stock from scratch, you could save the bottom, because it's going to have flavor. So that way you're using the entire leek. I'm not going to be making a stock today, but in case you're a type of person like me, I try to use the whole vegetable. So when you're cutting the vegetables, you can cut them as big or as small as you want them. If you're in a hurry like me, then you want to cut smaller so they cook faster, because at the end of your recipe, at the end of the day, you're going to be blending it all anyway. So if you want, you can go shorter. You can cut this leek in half, and then you're going to get smaller pieces, or you can keep them whole. So it's up to you. You're the cook, you're in charge. So whatever you want to do, whatever your occasion calls for, just good thing to keep in mind if you're in a hurry like me. So I'm using vegan butter. I like Earth Balance. So that's me. So that's what I'm going to be using. What I like about the vegan butter is there's less saturated fat, more of the healthy fat, the poly and mono unsaturated fat. So it feels good to be using that instead. So we've got regular onions, we've got leeks, and then we've got carrots. So we need to sweat them first. We're going to cook them about halfway, because when we add the butternut squash and the stock, that's going to continue to cook them. So you don't want to caramelize these or overcook them, because you're going to come out with a different flavor. And usually in other recipes, you do want that caramelization because you want that nice taste. But in this one, you don't need to caramelize them. They'll be fine. You just want to cook them down so they're soft, because you're going to puree them in the blender when you're done. And my recipe calls for 8 ounces, and each of these cartons is 6. So to save me time, I bought it already pre-cut, and so that should be enough. I put about 2 to 3 more ounces in there. One thing to be aware of is your handles might get hot, so don't get crazy. Don't touch these hot handles. So you can grab an oven mitt or whatever is near you, but so that way you can kind of keep stirring these up. But yeah, just be careful. Your pot's getting hot, so are the handles. When you're looking at the recipe, you want to think about why the ingredients are being used. So in our case, we know the carrots and the leeks and the onions are there to give it a great flavor, a depth of flavor. And then we know that I was saying is that our butter or oil, whatever fat we're using, is so it doesn't stick. It's going to add a little flavor as well. And then the butternut squash, of course, because it's the main star of the dish. And we're going to be adding caramelized apples, which I think is going to be really great. It's a fun touch on the butternut squash soup. So you can go for savory or you can go for sweeter. So I like the apples because the squash tastes good, but the apple kind of gives it a nice little hint of sweetness. So I think it's a really great addition to this recipe. So I don't know if you guys have noticed yet, but I haven't added any seasonings. So I like to taste and season as I go. However, this recipe does say to season at the end, and I like that idea, so then you don't over season, because you can adjust your seasoning at the end because we're going to puree it. Unlike if you were cooking an animal protein, say a roast beef or chicken, if you don't add the seasoning in the beginning, you don't really want to add it at the end. It's not going to be the same because it didn't cook through and the flavor is not going to be in that meat. In this case, with the soup, you can add the seasoning now if you want, or you can add it later. I'm going to add it later because I'm hoping I don't have to add a lot of salt and pepper or a lot of allspice or ground ginger for flavor. I'm hoping that I bought these fresh vegetables and I'm hoping that's going to be enough flavor. And keeping in mind whatever fat you're using, so I'm using a vegan butter, there's salt in that. So I don't want to over season my dish. So being aware of that too, that there might be sodium or salt in some of your other ingredients, so you don't want to overpower your dish. And so you guys can kind of see that everything's getting softer. Your carrots again are, like I said, what's going to take a while to cook. And really I love this recipe because it's really simple. You cut the vegetables, you cook the vegetables, and then you blend the vegetables. That's it. That's one of the reasons why I like it too. Simple, hearty, yummy. I'm going to be cutting baguette of bread at an angle, and so we're going to have that to dip, so it's going to be really yummy. Okay, so I'm getting impatient, and if you're like me, like I said, I'm in a rush. So I put the lid on, but when you do this, what you're doing is you're trapping the heat in, so now your vegetables are cooking from the bottom and the heat is staying trapped in there, so it's going to cook faster, but again, don't burn your vegetables. Alright, let's try another carrot. Almost there! Alright, I'm going to stir it around and put the lid back on. Give it another 3 to 5 minutes and we're good. We're going to add the stock and the butternut squash. Alright guys, so we are ready. So you can look and see that the vegetables we started with, they've gotten softer, and we went down to maybe half, maybe a little bit more than half of what we started with. So now we're going to add the stock and the butternut squash. So this is all the squash we're using, and it's about 4 pounds, which is what the recipe calls for. And then we're going to be adding the stock, and like I said, we're using vegetable broth. And the recipe calls for 160 ounces. That's about 5 quarts, but I'm just gonna use enough to cover all the vegetables. Maybe even a little bit less, because we just need to make sure that we have enough to be able to puree it. Okay, so we actually only ended up using 3 of the vegetable broth. So you can see what it looks like. So we fully submerged our vegetables. So it was pretty submerged at 2, but to be on the safe side, we did 3 because the recipe calls for 4.5. We turned up the heat, so now our heat's on high. We're going to bring this to a simmer. I'm going to cover it so it gets to that simmer quicker, and then once it gets to the simmer, we'll turn it down. Okay, so now I'm going to caramelize my apples. Okay, so the recipe said to peel them, and I forgot, but a little fiber never hurt anyone. So if that happens to you, don't freak out. It's fine. So we're going to do a little bit of a medium heat. You can do a little bit more, but I like medium. I'm gonna use vegan butter again. I'm gonna be caramelizing these apples not only in this vegan butter, but also in cinnamon and brown sugar. Really yummy. Reminds, again, these kind of, if you think about it, kind of like fall flavors are coming into play. So I'm heating it up. and you're gonna see it's gonna get warmer. It's gonna we're gonna kind of saute it a little bit because you want to evenly coat the apples in the butter and in the, you don't want to burn your apples, you just want to evenly coat them in the butter. So again, it doesn't stick to the pan, you can move them around. And you want to make sure that it's evenly coated with brown sugar and cinnamon. I am just gonna make sure, like I said, that the apples are evenly coated. So I'll just start out with a little bit, and then as I move along and as I start sauteing all the apples, then I'll see if it's evenly coated. You can also taste as you go. If you think it needs a little bit more sweetness, you can add a little bit more sugar. But let's start with less. So because you can always add more sugar but if you put too much sugar in the beginning, just like salt, you can't take it out. So you want to start with a little less, and then if you need more, you can add more. So again, I'm just trying to evenly coat the apples, or you don't want to overdo it. If you're like me and you're little, use 2 hands. You can do it. You just, again, you want it evenly coated. So if you're looking at these apples now, they're still a little white. I'm gonna add a little bit more. And I'm gonna add a little bit more butter just to be on the safe side so it doesn't stick. And also it moves around nicely. So, and I wanna make sure if the butter gets onto the apple, then the brown sugar and the cinnamon is gonna stick better too. So you just wanna make sure, watch your apples, don't let them burn. You can see it's caramelizing. See on the bottom how it's bubbling? Oh yeah, you want that. Here, you want that caramelization, it's gonna make them sweeter. Well, you've got the brown sugar and the cinnamon, but you want that because you want these to be soft because you're gonna be pureeing them. And you want them to be flavorful. So if you see there's some juice, that's good. That's a lot of yumminess because that's would be what's coating your apples. Don't forget about your pot. It's boiling. This is boiling. You don't need it to boil. You can bring it down to a simmer. Unless you're in a hurry like me, then maybe you will let it boil a little bit longer. But now it's coming down from that rapid boil. So we're gonna check to see if the butternut squash is ready to be blended. So kind of like what we did with the carrot, again, you'll be trying a big chunk. You wanna look for a bigger chunk. So again, we're looking for it to be soft because when we blend it, we don't want any chunks. We want it to be a nice puree, like what you would expect in a restaurant. So wait for that to cool. Make sure you don't let this burn. If you're not sure, take it off the heat. You can put it on low heat. That's what I'm doing. Let it cook. It's gonna be delicious, but I want to let it cook longer because I do want my apples soft because again, they're going into the blender too. It's almost there. Again, being careful, I want to keep cooking my apples because I want them softer, but make sure you're watching this and it's not too high heat because if you think about it, you've got brown sugar and butter, and so there's a chance if you get it too hot, you'll scorch your sauce here, and you don't want that because then it's going to be a bitter taste. Or if you let it sit or if it gets too hard, then it could technically become a candy because it's going to harden. So we're almost ready to blend. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be transferring our pot into our blender. Now, if you're cool, you own an immersion blender. And what that means is the blade that's in here, it's at the bottom of a bar and you just stick it right in there. Super convenient. We don't have that. So we're going to have to do batches. So we'll pour it in, blend. Once it's smooth, we'll pour it into a pot or a bowl, and then eventually we'll add it all back in there. And the reason why I want to add it all back in the pot is because it all fits in there, and then I'm going to saran wrap the entire thing because I'm going to take it to a party. So if you're like me, get in a rush, and I don't know what bowl to put it in, it's fine. Keep it in the pot, especially if you want to reheat it, which you will because you're going to want your soup warm. So your end soup, you don't want it to look like this where it's kind of like a clear soup. That's why we're going to put it in the blender, and the starch from the butternut squash actually helps to kind of make it thicker, a thicker consistency. So that's kind of the cool thing I like about butternut squash soup. Okay, so if you are not satisfied with the thickness or the consistency of your soup, what you can do is scoop out the vegetables first and add the liquid at the end, and you can add the apples too. And with less liquid, it will be less thin. If you want it thinner, then you add more liquid. So it's up to you, whatever you want your final product to look like. so it's already ready to go. And then because I'm going to a party, I'm just gonna, what I call butcher wrap it, so that I don't have to worry about it spilling in the car. So then the lid's on there tight. And you can actually wrap it from the other angle too. I think this will be just fine. And then once I've got my saran wrap, just use some scissors, cut it, ready to go. So you don't have to fiddle with that little razor that comes with it. And the cool thing about this recipe, after you caramelize the apples, it's up to you, you're the cook, but I tasted it and I thought it was great, so I actually didn't use any salt and pepper in this recipe. Thank you so much again, and I'm glad that you got to see from start to finish how to make butternut squash soup.